we get a call and they're saying, we can't find your parents. And my sister and I were caring for our parents. They both had dementia. When I went away to college, finances were a huge concern. So my dad was helping me with my rent. I effectively graduated in March. Then on April 1st, there was no check. And I thought it was late. I realized, oh yeah, I graduated and I needed to go find income. My first career was with Hawaiian Tel. Fourth time that they offered a voluntary retirement. I remember going home and saying, honey, I think I'm going to retire. He popped 2 beers. He went to the neighbor's garage and said, I think my wife's having a midlife crisis. One of the wonderful, wonderful memories I have is a fundraiser we did called With Aloha. This was right after the 3/11 disaster in Japan. One of our employees who's from Japan went personally to meet with the Tohoku University hospital administrators. It turned out that those funds were the first funds that hospital had received to support several years after the Tohoku disaster. Japan had used these modular homes to quickly house those that had lost their homes. And they were now getting into permanent facilities. So the homes that you see at Kahauiki village are actually from Japan. It's not luck or chance. There's serendipity here. It's part of something bigger and something really beautiful.
Greater Good Radio, connect, learn, heal, and grow, is brought to you by Brain Gain Hawaii, a boutique executive recruiting, career development, and coaching firm. Learn more at braingainhi.com. Welcome to Greater Good Radio. Today's guest is Susan Eichor, the CEO of AIO. And thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Evan.
Yeah. So this has been a long time coming because I know I've asked you before and it's like, no. Wait, so why this time? Like, what's going on in your life that makes it okay to now come on?
Yeah, I can't say that it's me. I think it's you.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. You've gone through a significant health challenge. And I saw you work through that. And that just inspired me. So I think when you ask this time, I can't say no to someone who has just been, you've always been a great resource to the community, but watching you work through that and be back 100% just inspired all of us.
You're making my head big.
It should be.
I'm going to have to go to my family and then have them just spend some time and it'll come back to normal.
That's what family's for.
Yeah, keep me in check. So when people ask you, what do you do? How do you explain that?
Oh my gosh. So Evan, as you probably know, IO is wholly owned by Dwayne Kurisu. And we're pretty diverse. We have a lot of media that I think some of the community is familiar with, but we also have a turf equipment company. We have food companies, the southernmost bakery in the United States of America. They're the experts. My role is just to support them. And then also I think we really take our role in the community very seriously. And so everything that we do should be in love and support of our Hawaii community.
So if you took a look at your time there, or even your time at all in all of the roles that you've done professionally, which one has been most meaningful to you?
Gosh, I can't tell you that there's one. I think my life has been all about sort of these random, unplanned experiences that sort of build on each other. I think what Hawaiian Tel, which was my first, career position, did was teach me that you just can't be the expert at everything. And maybe the best thing you can do is surround yourself with incredibly talented people and people that have those skill sets that are your pukas. Mm-hmm. And together, maybe we can do something greater than ourselves.
Do you have a story you can remember that will illustrate that?
I remember one of the jobs in the moment that I hated the most, I have to admit, was right after high school. I thought maybe medicine was on that list of things, right? So my mother helped me get a summer job with one of the long-term care facilities, a state hospital. So within the first week, I realized that healthcare is just a huge commitment. It's physically and mentally hard work, taxing. By the end of the week, I was ready to quit. Like, I was just exhausted. My mother never said, don't quit, but she made it kind of clear that I had made a commitment, for the summer. I got through the summer. I learned how to help people go from bed to wheelchair to helping with baths, feeding, etc. And I also came to the realization that I just didn't have what was needed to be in healthcare. Okay, so I thought that was good learning. Fast forward decades later, my sister and I were caring for our parents. They both had dementia. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was drawing from all of those experiences in those 3 months. And I also have come to realize that, like I said earlier, you got to admit sometimes you can't do it yourself. So first of all, I had an incredible sister. My husband was so supportive, but we also had a lot of outside help with my parents. And I look back and, it's funny, but I think that job really helped me also to kind of develop that. I think in Japanese we call it gambare, to kind of get through those moments. But in looking back, those were some of the most precious moments I spent with my parents too.
Since we're there, what would be some of those precious moments? I mean, if you're okay to share it.
There came a point where my parents weren't very verbal, but our language was touch and hugs and smiles.
I mean, when they were sick or when you needed care or before?
Yeah, during the care.
Oh.
Yeah. And, when you boil it down, sometimes some of those just quiet moments, just being together, are very special. I think sometimes I can get really caught up in my busy day. And during that time, I really needed to learn how to downshift. I needed to really just completely be in the moment and enjoy that moment. Initially, it was hard, but I think I got there, and I think I had some time with my parents that I otherwise, I hate to say it, but maybe otherwise would not have.
How long were you the caregiver?
So I had just started my position at IO, and about 2 or 3 months after that, my sister and I realized that both of our parents were going to need a lot more support. So I was pretty ready to leave IO because this is not what that company signed up for with me. But starting with our owner and the people around me, they said, hey, we're about family, so figure it out and we'll support you, which I am forever grateful for. But to your question, that began like a 9-year journey. We worked hard to keep them at home because that was their wish. At some point, their needs were greater than, what was safe to keep them at home. But yeah, it was a 9-year journey.
In that 9 years, what's the most memorable experience or memory you remember from that?
One of our favorite things to do was go to McDonald's and just get ice cream and just sit in the park and just enjoy each other. We probably hadn't done that since I was a kid, And yeah, it wasn't the fancy stuff. It was the simple stuff that really, I think I'll always treasure.
So both of them you were caring for at the same time?
Yeah.
And then they passed?
So my father passed in 2009 and my mom in 2014. Yeah.
So I had no idea on that because when we were doing radio with you folks in 2005, I mean, why would you mention it, I guess maybe, but I had no idea, which is kind of how it is in the workforce, right? People dealing with so many things that are really meaningful and heavy. And then if nobody else knows, then things don't make sense on why they might, respond or not respond a certain way.
Again, I'll go back to, starting with my sister. Siblings, at least for us, we had never worked together. We're sisters.
Yeah.
But when you're caring for someone, you're sort of working together, right? You got to do the scheduling, the coordination, the finances. And we were so fortunate. My sister and I just got into a rhythm where she would do the parts that I didn't like and vice versa. And I think really got closer. I can totally see how healthcare can also just really have the exact opposite effect
Totally.
on families.
Yeah.
And so we were just super fortunate. Our husbands were 200% supportive. I'll tell you a quick story. The first day that we had mom and dad in a long-term care facility, it was at home, which was nice. We were really worried. They weren't going there real happy, but they understood that it was necessary. Well, the following morning, Evan, we get a call, and they're saying, we can't find your parents. And so, like, what? So called our husbands. We're all in different places, 4 cars. What had happened was our parents had decided that they were going to make the best of it. So they were going to take a walk and didn't realize they're supposed to tell anyone. And then they got lost. And then a wonderful neighbor saw them, knew they were near one of the care facilities, so asked them if they were lost. And they said, yep, we sure are. And so everything worked out fine. But it was one of those moments where, there were so many times during that period, I don't know, like I would beat myself up because you wanted to be better. But I think I look back and we did our best. And I mean, even at work, I don't know that I shared a lot, but I always knew that I was supported, and that meant the world to me.
That's a big difference when I think about it, because there's so much conversation about retention, you know what I mean? Recruiting, retention, and so on. And you've been with IO for like a while, right?
Going
Since
on
2005,
20 years, yeah.
right? Was it 2005? You came in right when we were kind of getting in there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, certain companies, if they're taking care of you and the people take care of you, then people tend to stay. So my dad was sick, 2014. I mean, we had just come back from an Alaskan cruise with the whole family. It was super fun, all this. He goes on this trip, golfing trip, right? He's 7 years old. He goes on a golfing trip and he's having fun with his friends or whatever.
Yeah.
And he calls my mom and he's telling her, oh, I'm just really tired. But we're thinking, you're just kind of old, right?
Yeah, sure.
In Chinese style, it's like, suck it up. You're old, right? So just suck it up. So then he comes home and he mentions it again. And we're like, well, we should go doctor. But, typical. I don't want to go doctor. And his doctor is my uncle, right? So he's like, I'm going to see him in a couple weeks or whatever. So no worries. Okay, whatever. So I don't argue with my dad. So the next day I was visiting him for like lunchtime. And he says something about, oh, my feet are swollen. I go, really? So I look at his feet and they literally look like this. They look like football. I was like, oh my God, how did you even... Do you need an Amazon box? I told him to fit your feet, because that's how we talk to each other. Right? He's like, I'm like, you better go doctor. He's like, I'm not going doctor. So my wife comes over and she has a laptop and she shows him some like WebMD or something on the internet, right? She goes, you're going to have a heart attack. Look. He's like, oh, the internet's saying I might have a heart attack. I better go doctor, right? Because obviously they don't listen to us, but some site on the internet. Right. So we go and do all the tests. They do all the tests and it's basically, oh, you're just dehydrated. Just drink some Gatorade. But then in the morning, my uncle calls earlier and he says, you know what? I looked at all these tests. You probably have cancer. You need to come in. So as he was going in, my uncle redirected him and he said, no, you got to go to the ER right now. Like, okay, I'm going to go get my clothes and stuff. He's like, no, you go in right now. He said the white blood cells were like almost 200. It's supposed to be like 4 to 8, right? So we go through this whole long kind of like cancer journey, and where we moved him to Seattle. It was about 2 years he was there. I was there for about a year. That took a huge toll on my family. My wife ended up getting kind of sick, but our family came so much closer together. And the nice thing about that is, I mean, honestly, as I was growing up, I didn't really think my dad liked me too much. Like, he would tell his other people maybe, some nice things or so on, but he doesn't ever really say it to me. You know what I mean? So in the back of my mind, I was always thinking like, I don't think he liked me too much. But during that time we were able to spend together, there was just a lot of, time you're just in the hospital. I mean, sitting there for like weeks, or whatever, and you're just sitting there. So And the interesting thing is whenever he thought he was going to die, the conversation completely can change and we can have, a bit more moments. So these things are so tough though.
They are.
You know what I mean? And I never understood it until I had to go through it.
Exactly.
And the strain it takes, what it takes from everybody. Like my sister, my brother, and I, we would spend time in Seattle and then go home. So I would spend 3 weeks and then go home. And then my brother would come in for a week or something, go home. My sister would come in and we would kind of rotate it out. And that was for 2 years. So, the families have to be in it. But I just like you said, I've seen the entire opposite. And if then you have the opposite where there's just conflict and then you got to go do your work and something at work happens and then there's a blow up and then people are like, oh, this person, they have problems or whatever. But they have no idea what they're going through. I mean, that's hard.
It is hard, but I'm so glad for your family that it sounds like it brought you together too.
Yeah, because, my parents aren't the type that are like, oh, we love you and things like that. No, it's more like, oh, you fat, or, hey, what's that on your face? What? And then, oh, you want some food, which means I love you, that's kind of how it goes.
It's the language of love.
Yeah, you got to translate in there.
Yeah.
Freaks people out sometimes, like, what? Yeah, but
wow.
Those moments are special. I'm trying to be as present, but the hard thing about being present in a situation like that is it's just painful. It's hard to watch them in that diminished state or if they're in pain.
I don't know if you ever had this, but there were moments where I hated myself, but I would get frustrated, right? And I would literally have to just walk out the door and do a timeout myself. But I think, it also really helped me, like you said, to understand how to support others that are going through some sort of family health situation. It really gets you. And it's so important to have the support system.
I mean, you figure, especially for kind of our age group, everybody's going through it or, they either went through it or they're going through it.
Yes.
And then for us that have, kids that are going to college and stuff, I feel grief when they're leaving. I mean, I could be all like manly and so on or whatever about it and say, but I remember this. So my second son just graduated from high school and they were doing this variety show. So it's like a play that the whole class puts on and it was funny and he had a funny part. And I can remember I was laughing. It's funny, but I felt sadness. All I felt was sadness. And I was like, what is this? So weird.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that if I didn't have, people to talk to about it openly without being judged, that would be very tough. Along with caring for, elderly parents and so on. And then you got to go do your work stuff, put on your face and make like, oh, nothing. You know what I mean? Especially if it's not really accepted or not psychologically safe.
Yeah.
It becomes tough, man.
Would you also say, though, that sometimes work was a blessing? In the sense that, listen, as a caregiver, a lot of us are novices. And going to something where you sort of know what you're doing, it was almost like that was, a space that I also needed too, in a weird sort of way. Yeah, the juggling of time was always crazy. But, sometimes I just appreciated that I could not ever walk away from, caregiving, but be able to focus on something else for a little while. It was a little bit of a relief.
I think we have to, because if, in that kind of situation, sitting there for me, it's not like physically hard, right? I'm not like doing like hard labor or something, but emotionally, to try not to like break down, to hold the space and so on, it's tough.
Yes.
It's like a full-blown marathon workout inside. So without a kind of a way to off-gas it, that would be very difficult. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I've seen it before myself and others where it's like, no, I'm going to work. And like unconsciously work, just work because it's a good distraction, right? It can numb the other stuff out.
Yeah.
But then I would also have parts of me that would be guilting me out. Like, oh, you're working. You should be over there. Your time's running out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even if they're alive, they don't know who you are or they know anything. You know what I mean? You got all these things going on. and then we're trying to, lead things. And then you have COVID come up, right? Like
Where did that come from?
out and so on, or
Yeah.
Maui fire now on the other, right? It's not easy to just bounce back, I think, from that kind of stuff. There has to be a space to be able to come into that can hold that, whether it's, I don't know, a church, a therapist, a group, paddling team.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's work. And this is where I think where I was going earlier, is that when my dad passed away, he was really, really involved with like Wildlife Country Club.
Ah.
But I was surprised because I didn't see that many from the club. What I saw a lot of was family and work. And he had been retired for a while.
Oh.
But what I saw too were people who said, oh, I worked with your father 20 years ago. I worked with your father 30 years ago. This is what he did. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Because I only see my dad when he comes home and so on, right?
Sure.
So I was blown away because I work in, recruiting, coaching and so on. And I'm going to tell you, I don't see a whole lot of that.
Yeah. That
on.
must have been really special for you, though, to see the impact that your dad had on a greater community, right?
It was like that too because, it's my dad, so I'm kind of judgy. I don't know. I don't know how else to say it. It might sound bad or whatever, but I judge him. And then I think, oh, this is the things my dad did. And then we can remember like, the stuff that we don't like. And then it's harder sometimes to remember the stuff I do like. But I kind of find that balance is getting a bit better nowadays. But then, yeah, I mean, it was impressive. Like I did this show where we did 170 interviews the first time and so on of like people that are influential and so on. But I think that if you take all of them, I would still have to put my dad right up there.
Awesome.
I'm not going to tell him, but
I think he heard.
I'm not going to tell him, but yeah.
That's great.
I mean, how was it for your parents? Is that what you saw too?
Yeah, what I saw was a strength that I probably hadn't seen growing up. I think I also saw grace, because it's hard to realize that you can't drive anymore. And yet, they were always worried about, were we happy? Did we eat? Right? They were always chasing us home to get some sleep, So yeah, I saw that grace that, again, was probably always there, but I didn't really either recognize it or appreciate it as much.
Did you feel guilty?
All the time.
Oh.
I think, one of the things is learning how to have grace for yourself too, right? I have come to accept that sometimes doing your best is the best you can do. And it's really imperfect and you need a lot of help, and that's okay.
So knowing what you know now about your experience, then what advice would you give to others that are going through something similar?
So some of the things we've already talked about. Definitely don't be afraid to ask for help. There's a lot of resource out there. Incredible resource, really.
Like what kind of
Like
resources?
healthcare navigators. And there's so many different options in terms of what long-term care looks like, right? And definitely keeping folks at home, I think, is a preference for so many of our parents. And there's good options, and maybe not forever, but for a good time. Leaning on friends, family, it's okay. And I think it's also really important to, as hard as it is, find time to take care of yourself. And then I would say I had an incredibly supportive husband, but you can't forget the people around you. So you got to make time for your immediate family as well, too. And you'll make mistakes, and that's okay. I mean, you get through it.
So can you share a story about your father that would give us good context into who he was to you?
When I went away to college, I remember that, finances were a huge concern. And my dad made it pretty clear that he was going to do what he could, but I had a responsibility to go get loans and have a job and all of that, which is fine. Well, I was on a trimester system. So when I got to the start of my senior year, I realized that I could not afford the 3 semesters. I could do 2. So I just took a lot of classes and finished in 2. That year I was living off campus. So my dad was helping me with my rent. So I effectively graduated, I think, like in March. And then my dad's check would typically come at the end of the month for rent on the first of the month. And on April 1st, there was no check. And I thought it was late, so I waited a little bit. Around the third or the fourth, I realized, oh yeah, I graduated and I needed to go find income. It's a funny thing. I loved my dad dearly, but he knew that there was almost a lot of unspoken stuff, right? And so I went, oh my gosh. So I went and got 2 more jobs to just, quickly make up for that income. But I look back now and I love that he was that way. I love that he wanted his daughters to be independent and to figure things out. And I do believe that in those moments when I need strength, Dad taught me a lot about that.
And then how about your mom?
My mom and I am told, we're very similar in personality, which cuts both ways. Growing up, I think I was the headache. But I also think that nowadays, when I think about things that I love, things that bring joy, it comes from my mom. My mom was a beautiful dancer. She took hula after she retired. She performed. She always asked us, if we were interested, and I was like, no, I'm not. So anyway, when COVID happened, and we were at home. So the reality is I didn't feel like I could make the time commitment to a halau, which is the other reason why I just never pursued it, although I love hula. But I decided to go online, and I found an online hula class based in Aloha, Oregon, and started to dance, in front of a screen and made some wonderful friends. So here we are 4 years later, and every Thursday morning at 6 o'clock, I'm still with my halau sisters. And I kind of chuckle because I know Mom is probably looking down and going, see, I told you. But that was our relationship. And I think our time together when she needed more care and more support also brought us a lot closer too.
Was she the type to not want help?
Yes and no. I mean, my mom was a very strong, independent person. My mom always was working full time, which right in our days was a little bit unusual. She had graduated from college in business. So in that sense, she was very much a role model to us. She always was juggling family and work. And so, yeah, I guess to some degree she was very independent, but also, she absolutely expected us to have responsibility in the house, right? So I think it was a little bit of a balance there.
So maybe what is a story or insight you can share from your growing up that would give us context to who you are right now?
I think going away to college was probably, when you sort of look at those big moments in your life, I was the most homesick, crybaby freshman you could possibly imagine. And I was just in California. I mean, it's not like I went very far. I remember coming home at Christmas and was just this far away from telling my parents that I was going to come back home. And the other thing is, right, we have the University of Hawaii, which is a wonderful institution. So it just made it easier to make that decision. But I also it was one of those things where, okay, maybe I can do one more semester. So for me, being away was really hard. I ended up sticking it out. But I think, I'm one of those folks that my heart was always in Hawaii. So, some would say that I was nuts to be right in Silicon Valley in the mid-'80s when the boom was happening. And a lot of friends I have rushed to the Valley. I rushed home as soon as I could. But I've never regretted that decision. And I've also never regretted the time that I spent away, because I think it gave me a perspective. I never realized that, I think everyone's different, but I needed to know that sort of the learning and the culture and everything that we hold dear in Hawaii actually has total relevance throughout the country and frankly, globally. That we have a sense of community that I would suggest is one of the most powerful and wonderful things about Hawaii. But I couldn't see that if I hadn't gone away and could see it from the outside looking in. So yeah, and at the time, is that the reason why I went away to college? Absolutely not. I had no idea. It was just one of those things that I felt I needed to do. But now I really appreciate that I had that time away because being here makes it, just more precious.
So what would you say have been the major milestones for you if you look back in your life, or turning points or transitions?
When I came back to Hawaii, my first career was with Hawaiian Tel. And I think there was a little bit of...
They recruited you and then you came back?
Yeah. And at that time, technology was the thing, right? And I needed to prove to myself that I could work in a technology field. And so I was so grateful for my time at Hawaiian Tel, so grateful for the training that we received. But I also came to a moment where I also realized that I wanted to do something else, but I didn't know what it was. So if you recall, that was a time when everything was going digital. There was a lot of downsizing in telecom, right? Because a lot of it was becoming more automated. So around the third or fourth time that they offered a voluntary retirement, prior to that, I never even looked at the package. I just thought it wasn't for me. That time I looked at it, and it was a total leap of faith. I had no idea what I was going to do next. But I remember going home and saying, honey, I think I'm going to retire. I qualify. And he said, good. You do what makes you happy. Wow, it's kind of cool. So I did. The rest of the story with my husband, unfortunately, I didn't really realize this until much later. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have done it, is he went to the fridge. He popped 2 beers. He went to the neighbor's garage, sat down and said, I think my wife's having a midlife crisis. But in any event, that leap of faith for me, it opened so many doors. The first thing that happened was I became the accidental consultant. I didn't really even know what the word was or how you do that. But there was just, someone had asked me if I would be interested in, helping with telecom, with other companies. I was happy to do that. One thing led to another. That's how I met Io and Dwayne, because there was some telecom things. So I was really the telephone lady before anything else at Io. But what that did was it made me realize that, oftentimes, at least for me, I wasn't sure how much of those skill sets translate. And I pretty much thought that I should stay in telecom or technology. But I started realizing that maybe some skill sets, in fact, did transfer. And that maybe you could bring a different perspective. So with Io, I'm surrounded by incredible creative people, world-class journalists, broadcasters, all of this stuff I don't know how to do. I could never do what they do. But maybe I could help them with a lot of the things behind the scenes. Maybe we could help build a platform that would support them and be able to have their message be even broader. Yeah, I don't think I would have been here had I taken that leap.
Wait, so what was it that made you even consider retiring?
So I was mostly in operations. So in telecom, that means that if you have a fiber optic cut at 2 a.m. in the morning, you go and you're on. What I was realizing was that, I was tired, but also that I probably had not prioritized sort of the family things and things that were important to me in the way that I wanted to. And I really admire folks that are doing the on-call thing in whatever field, because it's tough. I needed to move on, and I just didn't know what it was. So that was really it. I also felt that I think I've always been more of a builder than a maintainer, if that makes any sense. And we had gone through this tremendous period of digital modernization when I was at Hawaiian Tel. I so enjoyed that. It was one of those things where you could literally like cut over a central office and seriously go from analog to digital overnight. You know, that you felt like you were making quantum leaps. And by the way, there's still so much that they're doing now in technology. So please don't, think that we finished. It's an ongoing thing. But a significant portion of it had been completed. And I think I was looking for sort of that next build, if you will. So
it's getting boring?
I don't know if it was boring. It seemed like a good time to move on. Like that certain things had been finished, if that makes sense.
Was it scary?
Oh,
you?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely scary. And, it felt like a very kolohe kind of decision at that moment, but it was like a leap that I needed to take.
What if you had stayed? That's an interesting one, huh? Would you be the career Hawaiian Telcom person, you think, or nah?
I think I probably would have moved on at some point.
Yeah.
I will say this. I think, like I earlier spoke about the diversity at IO, and I think that's what keeps me energized, right? Because there's always something going on. We have 2 radio stations, and we got a call out of the blue from FEMA. And apparently they have this program nationwide where they have an existing commercial AM station that they work with to harden that station.
What does that mean, harden it?
Withstand any kind of man-made and or natural disasters.
Mm-hmm.
So in the event that you have like a catastrophic event, you lose cellular coverage, you lose landline, you're sort of last resort, but you would have AM one way. In addition to that, the station becomes part of a national network. So in the event, God forbid, that our president had to speak to a nation quickly, that this network allows him to go out very quickly, and it's not dependent on electricity and, the normal communications. And they asked us if we would consider being that station. We had recently moved the tower to what I call the Kahauiki Village Peninsula. Oh. And so for FEMA, it was one of those rare sites where there was actually room to bring in their generators, their satellite dishes, etc. And what we do, right, is to serve community. So after our due diligence, we said, we want to be supportive. And so thus started like a several-year build out. But we now have, and when I say we, it's really not us. It's a community resource. So in fact, we just had a drill on Friday. FEMA was here along with state, county, private sector, first responders to be familiar with the site. What it is, Evan, is they literally build a studio in a 40-foot container that's hardened, that's right next to the tower. So that if you lost connectivity from your broadcast station to the tower, that you could just come in. It's built so that 2 people could stay in the shelter for 60 days and not come out. I hope that we never have to test that.
Like the TV show Lost. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's, got MREs and an incinerator toilet, a cot. But you and I have gone through, right, some really significant events. Iniki Iva is in our memory. Communications, especially in those first hours, is just so important. And by the way, also working with other broadcasters, which is, I love this. So we all have been trained on how to use the facility. We can't do it ourselves, right? So that in those hours or days where communications is limited, that people could at least go to their solar powered or, crank AM radio and still get that information.
Well, the thing I want to know is who has an AM radio. You know what I mean? Like
Well, we're
Where
going
would
to
I
make...
even go for that and get it, these days?
Well, you remember that FEMA was one of the huge advocates of keeping AM radios in cars with the American car makers. And that's the reason why. And then in an evacuation scenario where we were often in our vehicles. So that's your first one, right? But absolutely, we're advocates of keeping that battery-powered AM radio, just in case.
So you know how IO has so many almost like unrelated like businesses in there? Like, what is the rhyme or reason? What ties these things together? How does this make sense?
Yeah, it really comes down to Hawaii. I mean, it's celebrating all the wonderful things about Hawaii and experiencing it. Our owner calls it experiencing Hawaii with your five senses, right? So the sight and sound, obviously. But, with our food products, it's the smell, it's the taste.
Is that just a bakery or is there other things?
We have Pagoda restaurant, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so Dwayne's real estate company
Okay.
now is the owner of Pagoda as well. And they've been doing some really cool things. I don't know about you, but I grew up with Pagoda restaurant, right? That's where I had my high school graduation party and all of that. So just super happy that they will continue that incredible legacy. But yeah, and then, it's so cool that, there's so many times when we've drawn on all parts of our company to bring together an event with our food, with our platforms, using radio to share the voices that really are making a huge positive impact in our community. So yeah, it's maybe not everyone's design of how you would build a company, but in a weird sort of way, it makes perfect sense to us.
So what's a story that you can share that will illustrate that?
One of the wonderful, wonderful memories I have is a fundraiser we did called With Aloha. This was right after, you remember, the 3/11 disaster in Japan. And I think all of us in Hawaii, because we all have such close ties with Japan, couldn't believe what we were seeing. And, as it started unfolding and then the earthquake, tsunami, and then the nuclear impact. I remember getting texts immediately going, we need to do something. And when we got to work the next day, there were a lot of ideas going on, but we wanted to do something that would have immediate and direct support to the people of Japan in the affected area. Long story short, the idea was to very quickly put together a fundraiser at the Pagoda restaurant, but bringing together the community. And with Honolulu Magazine, we have wonderful relationships with the restaurants. So many of the restaurants came by and to support with food booths. We had music and entertainment. And then trying to figure out how these funds could be immediately effective. As it turned out, one of our employees, his wife was in Tohoku taking care of her mother. And she was at Tohoku University Hospital. So using various contacts, we were able to contact Tohoku. Unbelievably, the hospital had been spared, which was wonderful. The hospital also was sort of a nerve center for all of the community health facilities in the area. So they were in a unique position to be able to provide care and immediate support for a lot of the families. We pulled together a fundraiser with support from so many groups throughout the community. We had construction folks that brought in porta potties because there were so many people in the parking lot. And we had people that did, sort of makers kind of gifts and so on. We had a giant T-shirt that we signed for the Tohoku families. This fundraiser happened 3 weeks after the disaster. A week later, our owner and one of our employees who's from Japan actually went personally to meet with the Tohoku University hospital administrators. It turned out that those funds were the first funds that hospital had received to support. And I'm sure A lot more came later, but they were just very moved. Since then, we've continued to be in touch with a lot of our Japan colleagues. And the amazing part of the story is you probably know that Dwayne had a vision to build Kahauiki Village, which is a village for families that were previously without homes. One of our community members at that point, this was, of course, several years after the Tohoku disaster, Japan had used these modular homes to quickly house those that had lost their homes. And they were now getting into permanent facilities. And so by reaching out, it turns out that they were able to donate these modular homes that could easily be, brought down and then shipped. So the homes that you see at Kahauiki Village are actually from Japan. And thanks to, again, great support from the community, the shipping was donated. But it was just an incredible story, at least that I think that how life really comes full circle sometimes. And whenever I see the homes, I always think about that we're really part of a much larger global community.
It's kind of amazing how it comes full circle like that, huh?
I think so. And I also think, I don't know about you, Evan, but it's not luck or chance. There's serendipity here, right? It's part of something bigger and something really beautiful.
That's always what I'm looking for. I mean, I'm trying to make the connections on that. If you notice, that's where all the questions kind of go through, is trying to put all those pieces together to see how it connects.
Yeah. And now at Kahauiki Village, it was amazing to see this community come together to put Kahauiki together. I mean, it was, private, public sector, government, everyone lending a hand in huge ways. But you realize that community doesn't happen with structures. It happens with people. That's the glue. And so it was really watching those first families move in. Institute for Human Services, provides the social services that to this day continue to support the community. So we do a IO Fellows leadership program every year. This year, our fellows decided that their community project was going to be working with the University of Hawaii athletic department through their contacts with ESPN Honolulu and do a basketball clinic for the Kahauiki Village kids. It was really cool. I mean, like both the men and women's teams were there the whole morning. The kids were thrilled to be actually drilling with, the heroes that they've seen on TV. And I can't help but thinking that these opportunities are, you don't know it in the moment, but they're life-changing. Now that they've been residents for a while, some of those young people have gone off to college. They're taking everything that they've learned and moving forward. And I think the story about the housing from Japan, I think we're going to see so many more of those stories from the young people that grew up at Kahauiki.
It's a great story, Susan. What else you got?
So, early in my career, I was really driven, right? I mean, that was what I did.
I wouldn't have guessed that. Yeah.
But in fact, if you're working with the right people, not only is there space to do the right thing with your family, but it's sort of like, it's almost an expectation that, right?
It's not almost an expectation.
You're right.
It is an expectation.
You're right.
It's implicit and it's explicit a lot of times.
And, for me, I think, I hate to admit it, but it maybe took a while for me to get there. I was just blessed that I was in the right place at the right time, right?
What do you mean to get there? To get where?
To get to a place where, you realize that there's these moments in your life that you have to be all in. And they're never at the right time. You're never like, oh, okay, you can schedule it. It just is. And it's okay. And you just make it work somehow. Here's the other thing, though, that I know is true for me, is I've decided that sleep is completely overrated. I used to stress about, the 6 to 7 hours. I'm like, Who does that? And if I was spending more time stressing about it than, so now I don't worry about it. Like if I
So
can
do you sleep better now that you don't worry about it?
oh no, I sleep way less.
Huh.
And I don't worry about it. Like maybe at some point it's a problem, but right now if I can do 4 hours and I'm functional and I'm okay, I don't worry about it.
That's interesting because all the sleep studies and so on now is all about, getting the amount of sleep and
Oh
so
yeah.
on.
Oh,
But
yeah.
everybody's different, maybe. So
I think so too.
so if you're only sleeping 4 hours, how are you dedicating your time? How much of it is work? How much of it is other things? What are you doing in that time?
I'm not super structured, but I typically am up by 4 in the morning and I'm not out of the house till maybe 7:30. So it's a combination of work, life, just everything. Yeah, because it doesn't fit in an 8-hour day.
Do you do self-care type things or meditate or anything like that, or not really?
I have tried, and I think I'm getting a little better at meditating. I went to Chozenji, and it kind of gave me a structure.
Is that
now.
Colbert's one?
Yeah. So, you know that I'm a runner, or I should say a jogger. And I've been doing that for a long time. So I think that might be another thing, right? That's my space.
That's a meditative space.
Yeah.
Once you get in there and then it's like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah. I never carry a phone, ever. I mean, I don't go to like places where you really need one either, right? I stay in lit, safe places. But I don't want to be interrupted. That's the one time that it's just my time to think. The scary part is I start talking to myself, and people have seen me talking to myself. But I'm working through things sometimes. Yeah.
But that's normal.
Thank you.
No, it's normal. It's just whether people want to admit it or not. Right? The hard thing is that when we make things that are basically normal, not normal. You know what I mean? Then you have that judgment of like, oh, it's good or bad or right or wrong. Then things get minimized. So an example of that would be like that, like, having a self-dialogue. Everyone's got a self-dialogue.
Do they all move their lips too, though?
I mean, people do things. I don't know.
Teasing.
I don't know, but it's, whatever works.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing about like emotions, especially in a Asian culture. I mean, this is Hawaii, but there's a strong Asian culture here, right? Which is, no, we don't acknowledge that. You know what I mean? We don't acknowledge sadness. So then you have it where like it's not okay for women to feel anger. So it'll be internalized as sadness. It's not okay for men to be vulnerable or weak, but it's okay to be angry. You know what I mean? And then you have all these kind of mixed messages of what's okay and what's not okay. And that causes issues.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So the meditative state, to me, is just being able to kind of access that space between thoughts. And a lot of times it needs to be with movement. Even in hula, I don't know if you have this, and I don't do hula because nobody would want to ever see that. But I asked my daughter and so on about it. And it's like at some points they'll just almost go unconscious and they'll just flow through it, right?
Yeah.
Where it's just all feeling and there's no more kind of thought and stuff in it.
She's way more advanced than I am, but I've had a few moments.
Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Where you're in that running, and then next thing you know, your mind is calm. You've already calculated out everything, and then it's peaceful, right?
Yep.
So it's good to be able to know what it is that works.
Can I ask you what your meditative states are, or how you get there?
So meditation to me is like being there, sitting, listening,
Yep.
and having messages coming in, right? Prayer would be sending like that messaging kind of out. So meditative to me, the easiest ones are like foil surfing or things where I am consciously kind of doing activities, but then so my mind is a little bit preoccupied.
Yep.
It could be swimming. It would be what we call like downwinder, like a distance kind of paddling, or like they call it wing foiling. It looks like a windsurfer. So you're doing things that are not so much repetitive, but kind of where you can get into kind of a rhythm and not like worry about dying so much or something, I can do sitting practices. I'll do things like therapy is extremely kind of meditative, right? Especially any therapies that are not super cognitive. You know what I mean? Body-based therapies, brain spotting, internal family systems, could be even like EMDR, stuff like that. Psychedelics will do that. You could talk about like microdosing, which is like 1/10 or 1/20th of an actual dose, which people will use a lot of times as kind of like an antidepressant or things like that. And it'll also help to kind of calm the really loud vocal parts of us.
Yes.
Yeah, could be anything like that. Could be community, group interactions. This is meditative for me. Right? Yeah. So a massage.
Yes.
And acupuncture.
Yes.
Yeah. I kind of have a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
It's whatever works. Because otherwise it's a lot. Yeah.
My niece is a child psychologist, and she gave me this image of, which I use a lot actually, sitting outside, there's a stream next to you, and that loud voice that you just talked about, you're going to kind of gently acknowledge it and put it on a leaf that's flowing down that river. And I don't know why, but that completely works for me. And sometimes gives me that peace, right? It comes back. Like I keep putting it in the river. But yeah, some image for me, because I think I'm super visual, is helpful.
So I've done a lot of training in internal family systems. And kind of the basic gist of that is we all have parts. Like our systems are multiples. It's like a part of me thinks I should be sleeping. Part of me says, nah, I don't need sleep.
Yes.
Part of me says, maybe I should eat then. You know what I mean? So these are parts of us, and they all have their own kind of sub-personality to an extent, and they all have roles. And the roles are either to protect us, or typically it holds a wound, right? So the ones that are protecting are managing things. That's the one that makes sure you get here on time.
Yeah.
That's the one that makes sure Susan is doing a good job as a boss, as a wife, as a sister, as a daughter, and managing everything really nice and tightly. And then if that doesn't work, then the ones that jump in are like reactive, like firefighters. I'm going to put this out at all. That could be any kind of ism, right? Workaholism, excessive exercise and eating, whatever, you know what I mean? It goes all the way up to like cutting and then suicide, right? So those are basically trying to take us out of pain, right? And then we have parts of us that hold a wound, right? Young parts that typically holding some type of emotional pain get stuck in there. And anytime those parts now didn't get what they wanted, they come up and they want to express themselves because that's what they needed at the time to kind of process it through, but didn't get it. Now it's stuck in time. It comes up. That's what we call a trigger or an activation. And then the protected ones have to kind of jump in and control that because that feeling for us, we've been spending a lot of time not feeling that. So what is really helpful is to be able to turn to notice it, like what is actually loud in our systems. And instead of shutting it down, setting it down, leave it on, acknowledge it. Here's the best example. So in this room where you're sitting, right, we had COVID, we had the remote schooling, right? So my youngest daughter is a kindergartner at the time, which, oh my God, you're going to, so she would sit over there, right? And then I would do stuff on my Zoom calls right here. It was like, the screen was over here and I would do my Zoom calls. And lo and behold, within a few minutes, guess what? Hi, Dad. How's it going? I'm here. Dad. And I'm on the Zoom call trying to be professional or doing something and be like, I put the thing, push the button to go to mute, and it'd be, should cover my mouth like beat it, go away, And then my hands down here doing stuff like this, trying to like push like get out of here. I'm busy. And then next back again, boom, gets louder and louder and louder until finally it's like, I have to, okay, I'm sorry. My daughter is right here. Can you just give me just a second, right? So then put on pause. I have to turn to her and I give her all my attention and it becomes, okay, honey, what is it that you need? And it's like, it's that. Oh, okay. That's okay. Okay. And then once she feels fully seen and heard, then it's like, come give me a hug. Wait, where are you going? I can't even keep her anymore. She's gone. Right?
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing with the parts of us inside.
Yeah.
Where the harder we try to push it away, the more resistance we do it that way, the more resistance, the louder it's going to get.
Yeah.
Right? We call it like a U-turn, like a Y-O-U turn instead of U-turn, right? And then acknowledge them.
Yeah.
and ask, like, what is it that you need me to know? Especially if you're really visual, you would see it. It looks like something. It feels like something, and it'll tell you. It'll tell you very clearly. And then once that part feels that it's acknowledged, it feels like you really getting it, it'll drop its intensity on its own. You won't force it or anything. Now what we have is a relationship, because with all of these parts in our system, we also have self, right? To me, it's kind of like that. The same as like ha, right? Ha is the breath, your spirit comes in with you at birth, leaves with you at death. There's nothing it needs to learn. It's just there. These are the moments that we have, like maybe when you're running and it's just peaceful, calm. I don't have to solve anything. I don't have to fix anything. And I can work out of this space so much clearer without a whole lot of, I got to fix and judge and analyze and so on. It's that kind of space. So that is almost like the sky behind the clouds, right? And then if the clouds are there long enough, the clouds are the parts. If the clouds are there long enough, it feels like there's no more sky, but there actually is. So then the work just becomes being able to reintroduce and notice that there's the sky that's actually there, and then build those relationships once again. And then the peace just comes because you have relationship. We're always looking at what's relationship outside, but it's the most important one is what's relationship inside. Yeah. It will absolutely mirror what goes on outside. Sure. Yeah. Does that make sense, or?
It does. I have one more question for you though. So with that work you do, it can be intense.
Super intense.
It can be very personal.
It's always personal.
Yeah. And I think someone who is not knowledgeable about what they're doing could start internalizing, right?
You want to be guided through that. And the beauty on like these types of models is like, so let's say you're a client, right? You don't actually have to tell me anything, right? I'm just guiding you through the process of relationship with yourself. And it really is about being able to offer the parts of us that hold these wounds or are wounded the support that they need now that they didn't get back then. And when that happens, it's pretty much done. When those parts heal up, it's done. It's the same thing as if I get a cut on my arm. I'm not over here sitting going like, heal arm. I'm not doing anything. I'm basically trying to create an environment that is conducive so my body heals itself. Yeah. That's exactly what's happening inside too.
A little different. I think my question is more about how do you take care of yourself as you're counseling people that
me. Okay. So that would be being able to go like doing stuff in the ocean, right? Okay. To clear off kind of the energy and so on. Yeah. It's also doing our own work, because if you know how you have two people, right? Something happens. One is flipping out. Other one's like, I don't even know what's going on. What just happened was something internally just got activated, right? It's something historically that happened that now is touching on that wound. Now that person's protectors are all going, things are up. Yeah. Right? However, if that person does their own work and heals those parts up, they don't get activated like that anymore. That's when you talk about wisdom, right? Which is being able to have that same memory, but without the automatic electrical kind of reaction coming from it. Yep. So for me, I have to do a lot of my own work. We say it's like you get hurt in groups, you get hurt in relationship. So we heal in groups, we heal in relationship. That's a lot of times, that's why I do stuff like this and so on. It's like it's in relationship. And that's where all these kind of sprays and so on come up, because there's certain things that can be done to kind of allow that parts of others' energy and so on to go. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But that's a big part, because you have to. Right?
Yeah, because what happens is the hard thing is that when people enter into work like that, a lot of times they're coming from an empath type of archetype. So they feel like if I take on your pain, I will almost like marinate it in myself and take it on and help you and so on. That becomes super, super hard. Yeah. Right? So when people talk about like compassion fatigue, it's actually not compassion fatigue. It's empathy fatigue. Because sympathy is like, I feel sorry for you. Empathy is like, you feel pain, I'm in pain with you. Yep. And compassion is like, you're in pain, that's not my pain, but I'm here to sit and support you however it needs to be done. Yeah. So compassion actually activates the pleasure centers of the brain, whereas empathy, although important, activates the pain centers. There's actually research on that from researcher, her name is Tanya Singer. You can look it up on that. So if people continually empathy without, that's burnout.
Yeah.
When it's compassion, you can actually keep going and be energized from it. It's hard to separate sometimes the two because, people that like to help or feel like a need to help, just do it. So this is something to kind of keep in mind. And there's also a kind of a type of person that's called a highly sensitive person, HSP, where like some people, their visual is just way better, or their sense of touch or smell or so on. Highly sensitive people, they feel things at a much higher level. So emotionally, if somebody feels it on like, let's say level 3, a highly sensitive person might be feeling in level 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And a lot of times if those people are in leadership roles and they don't know how to really manage that or to work with it, that's the ones you see flipping out.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
They're effective because, it doesn't have too much to do with how functional or effective you are. But how you operate and how you interact and so on, it does. Yeah.
I struggle with that because I haven't used those words, compassion, empathy, but it comes very close, I would say, to putting a word that makes sense to me, and what the differences are. Because, I've had employees that have had horrible situations.
Yeah.
And I realize that there's times when it's
Too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right that you have to watch it, not just for selfish reasons, but you can't help when you're there, right? You become part of it, right?
Exactly.
So that's something that I've tried to be better at, but it's hard.
Yeah, I think you said it right there. Because like, if you look at like someone falls in a hole, you look at them and you go, oh, too bad you're in the hole. That's sympathy, right? You go, oh, you know what? I'm going to come in the hole with you. That's empathy. And then compassion would be, oh, you're in the hole. Let me help you kind of get out, right? When we need empathy a lot of times in business because we need to understand what the client or the other side is going through to determine what a solution is going to be or the proper solution is. However, if we take that kind of all-encompassing and move into that emotional space that people are going through, let's say that, their parent is sick and we're going through the same, now we're both inside this hole, and yes, it feels good to an extent because we kind of feel like supporting each other, but now we're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
You ever have it too where somebody's like, oh, I just feel so much better. And then you leave and go, holy frick, I feel so much worse. The hell? Like the fastest way to get rid of all like kind of anger, rage is to rage on somebody else. And they now have it and it's like, I feel pretty good now.
Yeah, right.
Right? And then that person, so it's like, I'm having a bad day. If someone yells at me, I go yell at my son goes yells at my daughter, you know what I mean? We're all feeling pretty good until the daughter's not, right? And then she gotta go, kick the dog or something, right? So that's...
I have 3 dogs.
Right? That's what we're trying to avoid. So to know that there's ways to kind of off-gas that or not take it in necessarily is important. But who teaches that, right? Like you're in a company and it's a manager or somebody who's in charge of a division. These days, just technically being okay is not good enough. You won't be able to keep your staff. People want more, right? They want to know that somebody cares. They want to know that you have a relationship. Because it's hard to leave a relationship. It's easy to leave a job. But then when you do that, it's like, well, oh my God, I'm so tired. I can't even do that. I got to go home. I got stuff at home going on. I have my own health things going on. It becomes a lot.
Yeah.
That's where I think a community space makes sense. That's where I'm been kind of quietly been moving around in the last number of years is how does that support look? Especially I think for like HR people or people that have to deal with people because they haven't gotten any break. And then you look at them and you go, oh, that person's sick now, or something's not right, or what? Yeah, because they haven't had any break. Everyone comes to them with their issues. They're the first responder. They're fire, they're police, they're medical. And what are they doing to be able to have some place that's supportive and helpful? And that's what I'm always been concepting. The energetic concept is like a 21st century pu'uhonua, right? A place that you can go and basically recover and work together as a group in a safe space, using the group's energy for a personal kind of role and then for a personal kind of help, and then you come back out when you come back out. I think that's where, at least individually, when I talk to people, we're trying to get back to. But then you have so much of this external of like, this is how it's done in the West. These are all the best practices. This is what comes from whatever top tier research place or company or school or so on. But in reality, when you look at it, it's relationship. I mean, the whole Kahauiki thing that you mentioned is all relationship.
100%.
So the farther we move away from that, the more problems that are going to show up as symptoms. And those symptoms will look like disengagement. They will look like attrition, hard to recruit. They'll look at stuff like that.
Yep. The hope I have, though, is that, okay, this is totally a sign of old age, right? One of my great joys nowadays is doing leadership development, right?
Yeah.
And, like, you've been there, Evan, when someone is involved in a community effort and the light just goes on, right? And the reward is huge. And I'm not talking about monetary. It's all about, like, maybe in some small way, I turned around this child's life. That they have an opportunity that they didn't have before. That, to me, is the hope we have. And through the IO Fellows program, we're small, right? We're not like these big, leadership programs. But every year we have a cohort of about 4 or 5 folks. So this is our 3rd year. And I'm realizing that I think I'm learning more than they are from them, and sort of understanding what things matter to them. Yeah. And it is generational. Oh my God, I become my parents. But it's changing. And I don't know, it's been really cool to see what they do. Our program is not lecture. It's very experiential. So they kind of got to decide what they do with that or not, right? And it's been one of my great joys the past few years.
So maybe you can share a story that illustrates that.
Okay, so the IO Fellows program, we try to bring together every year a group of folks from all of our different companies. And so the first thing that happens is the diversity is really important. So you have accountants with creatives, and I think that's part of the magic, right? And at this point, they're very much self-selected. Like, they have to be ready because it's a huge commitment. It's like, I think 6 months, and they're 4 to 8 hours a week on their own time. So that's a big part of it. But okay, so I would say that we probably manifest the most when they come to their community project. I'd like to think that it's all there. It's just sometimes trying to unleash that and letting them realize, like, you got it. You have all of the skill set and everything you need to do amazing things. That's the joy that I'm getting right now from our Fellows program.
So what you're getting from it is being able to watch them be instead of do?
Yes, to some degree. But I think what I'm also seeing is that, I think you said it earlier, you're kind of in a construct of, you think there's an expectation, but really what it is, the creativity that's here, right? And that confidence to just be yourself and just do it. So maybe you did say it best.
I mean, that's what people just want, right? Is to feel seen and heard.
Yep.
And valued.
Yep.
And then a space that they can just be.
Yes.
Right? Like, where can I just be myself without having to worry about if I'm accepted or not, and if I belong or not? Where can I just be?
Yeah.
So that reminds me of a story. You ever been to Thailand?
Never been.
Yeah. So Thailand has a really giant solid gold, like, Buddha statue. I think it's like hundreds of pounds. I think if you melted it, it'd be like $500 million or something like that. It's super valuable. But what happened was, like, hundreds of years ago, they had this statue. And then Thailand was being invaded by, I think, Burmese. And then Burmese were killing everybody in sight. So what the monks did was they covered the statue with clay and rocks and stones and so on, right? But then they all got killed. So you had this, what looked like worthless giant Buddha statue, and it was under a tin roof. And then I think it was around the 50s or so that they were going to redevelop that area. So they told the monks, hey, you got to move your statue. So they're okay. So they brought in the machinery to try to move it. And in the process of moving it, it started to crack. And one of the monks took a light at that point, is kind of to check out the cracks. Like, oh, it's shiny. So they started chipping away all the plastic. Underneath, you find, whoa, it's this solid gold Buddha statue worth, $500 million or whatever. And that is kind of the metaphor I like for like people, right? We're always looking externally for how can we become this gold or find this gold or so on, where it's always been there on the inside and just needs a little bit of help to crack through it and chip pieces off and allow it to shine through.
That's it.
That's kind of how I saw it.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I just want to acknowledge you. Thank you for coming. I've known you for a long time. I've admired you for a long time. I know you're busy, and I know you don't like to do these things. So thank you.
You made it very painless. And yeah, there's a lot of conversations where we're here. So thank you for allowing a conversation to be here, right?
Yeah.
So thank you. You're doing something special.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
If you resonate with Greater Good Radio, please join our community at www.greatergoodradio.com, where you can get access to exclusive content and offerings. Hope to see you soon.